Welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast, where we experience life being the real you. I'm your host, Randy Adkins Jr. Today, we have a guest, Calvin Cassady. He's a Christian author and a trained journalist. He served in his church as a youth minister for 11 years. He currently serves on his church vestry. He's worked for 40 years as a career educator. He has had the honor of serving as a tribal leader at the Seneca Cayuga, a federal recognized Indian tribe. He's married to his wife, Vicky, and they have 2 daughters and 4 grandboys. He's serving God as his mission, and he lives in Southwest Missouri. Calvin, it is wonderful to have you on the Produce on Purpose podcast. How are you this day?
I am doing really good. Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity.
Great to have you on. I always like to start off by allowing you to provide an introduction of yourself to our guests. Can you share a little bit about your journey and also what you would like for our audience to get out of our conversation today?
Okay. Grew up in Southwest Missouri, Southeast Kansas. When I was in college, I was involved in a really bad car accident, and it set me up for this journey to heaven and back. We said when we talked in the pre-show, I try to condense that down to as little as possible because that could take a whole hour to explain. We'll get into a little bit more of that as we go along, because that was just the crux of the book. The whole book was developed around that experience. But the rest of the book talks about the effects of the experience, and I think that fits in with the theme of producing on purpose, because my purpose is to help people find God, live a better life, encounter love, and so since that particular experience, which anybody that would have experienced it would understand, your life does become a purpose after that. And sometimes, you don't just sit down and say, what's the purpose of my life today? But whenever you have a break and you sit down and look and you say, well, maybe I'm kind of tired today. And you say, well, we accomplished a lot today, or maybe we didn't accomplish a lot today, but we set some things in motion that's gonna have some positive effects. And some days are just not like that, because you're not always gonna have a winning day, but you're gonna try. You're gonna try for that, and but that's pretty. I've pretty much most of my life's been lived since then. That happened a long time ago. I'm 73 years old now, and that accident happened when I had just turned 19. So most of my life's been lived since then. And so when I talk about my life, that's what I'm talking about.
Well, that sounds like a long time, a lot of great experience and wisdom that you have to share with us. I would like to start by just asking for you to share the experience that you ended up having. So my understanding is you had a near-death experience and you came back, and just explain a little bit about what that experience was like, and then we'll go a little further.
Okay, good. And thanks for that opportunity too. And again, I'll try to make it concise and not get too strung out. But there's 3 important parts of this story. The first part is the going, and the second part is the visit in heaven. The third part's the coming back. And all 3 of those are very, very important. The first part is when you're leaving this world that's full of sin, and it's full of racial problems and homelessness and all kinds of stuff. And you notice that as you leave. And a lot of times people talk about when they die, a light flashes in front of them. Well, that's true. But also all these other things that are a part of our lives also flash in front of you. And it's not so much what you've accomplished, but what you're leaving behind. And you're really thankful. And I said that the biggest part of that going is dropping sin, dropping Satan, and being free. And when you hit that freedom part, that's when you reach heaven, and it's like the whole new world opens up, and I'm going to tell you, I didn't see any streets of gold, but I saw a beautiful place that was peaceful, that was free of pain and suffering, and and I like to call that the peace that has understanding, because I think that's what heaven is built around. And I imagine there's more. There's lots and lots of scenes of heaven. And I've done some reading since this happened, and I noticed that almost everybody has a little bit different take on it. But during that time, I experienced a conversation with God, and He set my purpose on track for the rest of my life. The coming back part may be the most important part, because that's when you realize what the job ahead of you is going to look like. I mean, that's whenever I get you realize the plight that Jesus had to work through whenever he was working on earth. The things, the stuff I left behind, it was really nice to drop it off. I mean, it felt great because you had, got rid of all that burden. When you come back, you realize, that I'm going back to a world that is far, far from perfect. It's like I said, it's full of racial imbalance. It's full of homelessness. It's full of war. It's full of, politics that we'd like to not have to live with. Child abuse, all kinds of stuff. And, when you were saying goodbye to it, it was one thing. But when you know that you're going back and that's part of your purpose, you're going to be working with these issues. And, you might think that would make you say, stop, I want off. let me off this drain. But it was, a challenge that I'd accepted. And, and then when I woke up, I was in the hospital. Everything was back to normal. I'd been in a bad car wreck. I had some recovering to do. But again, there was a purpose there, purpose to heal, purpose to get well. I was fortunate enough to be in a Catholic hospital simply because there was a strong emphasis on religion and an opportunity to share. And I think that had a lot to do with my healing too. It also had a lot to do with me accepting what had happened. I know, we didn't talk too much about this before, but my recovery, there's chaplains, and every hospital has chaplains, but your Catholic hospital, you have chaplains, and you have sisters that come around a little bit more regular than your chaplain does. But I remember some nights, especially early on, the nurse, the nuns coming by and wanting to visit. This is late at night, and I could share some of these things that had happened to me that were making not a lot of sense. And they were really, really good to listen and reinforce that and say, accept it. This is something that you're blessed with, one thing I remember is the 23rd Psalm, where you walk through the shadow of death, and the power that you feel and that you felt, and then to come out on this side. So that sets up, and this, ever since we talked before, I really thought, producing with a purpose is just so perfect, because that's basically the message that I was given, was that you have a purpose every day, and it doesn't, you some days are going to be great, some days are not, but you got to work, you got to, some days you take a breath, say, I'll do better tomorrow, but you never give up. And it was so much easier when I was teaching school, because you were looking every day. You go into the classroom and you'd look out there and
Mm-hmm.
you'd see a purpose, something that you needed to do, someone you needed to help, even if it wasn't in the classroom, if it was in the teacher's lounge or at a teacher's meeting. But there was always something there,
Right.
and you might think, well, you couldn't escape. And that's partly true. But I mean, there was definitely, you definitely saw the need.
Thanks for talking it through that, because we hear of many people that have near death experiences. It sounds like that experience really put you on a path to understand what your purpose is. Of course, I speak a lot about that. I also have a book related to this to talk about us producing on the purpose, and the focus is understanding what God created you to be and what you should be doing here as you unveil what you were born to be. So, what was the exact message that God told you at that moment and at that time that your purpose was to do here on Earth?
Well, simple message: uh, serve God, build a kingdom. Um, you know, and that was that was the core message.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, for my particular case, uh, your primary mission for at least the next few years is going to be to serve young people and serve that part of the kingdom. And like I said, whenever I came back and realized what had happened, recovery actually for the injury went pretty quick. I mean, and the turnaround was the year following the accident was the year that I did my student teaching and I started my church work. So it was, it was just part of the plan. There was a map, and it's been. I tell you, the older you get, the harder you travel. I guess harder you have following directions. I mean, it seems like since I got older, I get lost more often.
Well, I that's always interesting, right? It was like you think you're like, oh, I can get around, but if you end up in surroundings that you need not be in, maybe it's a little harder to get around and do what you need to do. And so you do have a book called what is it, Bridging the Gap,
Bridging
and
the Gap: A Spiritual Journey to Heaven and Back.
yeah, so in that book, you talk about a little bit about what we're talking about, that transition, and about heaven and making it to where we need to be. Tell me what that central piece of bridging the gap that we all need to have in our lives that we should be doing.
Well, first of all, the title "Bridging the Gap" was simply bridging the gap between heaven and earth, between our Heavenly Father and His plan for us, and our plan, our own plan. Because of the experience, it's a lot easier for me to understand that there's two different things. I mean, a lot of people don't, who haven't had that benefit, that personal contact, can fool themselves into thinking that they have control, and that and it's going to come out the way they want it because they can do that. And I guess that's part of the purpose. That's where people get themselves in trouble. Um, and again, getting back to young people, they don't have a lot. I mean, they're young, uh, and their belief system is built on a few things. And if any part of that breaks down, then they start being lost. And I think I think that goes without saying that we have created in the 30 years that I've been out of the field. I'm seeing more and more lost children, lost adults. Um, but the purpose, the core purpose for me, was to find those people and kind of bring them out of that and and pull them in to this idea that you can be part of the solution. You don't have to have, you know, you don't have to have that overpowering experience that I had, but you can, but you can live, you can live by example, and I'll try to set that example for you. Um, uh, but we're all important. It just, I was given this job, which some people would say is a real chore. Some days it feels that way, but most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time it feels great. And but sometimes you go through stuff with people, and you're right there with them, and you can understand why they're about to break. Where but that you and God, and that's where the key is. They've got to learn. They got to believe. They've got to relax. They've got to surrender. And I know during the last Lent, it was a prayer I prayed every day, and it was a simple prayer: Jesus, I surrender my life to you. Every day. And that's what it all boils down to, right there. Um, it, it, and for Americans, for people, human beings, it's a very difficult thing to do, because we've got too many things that we think fit our purpose that doesn't necessarily fit our purpose. We just, we want what we want. And so I think that little added push that I have reminds me to come back to come back to God when things get askew, and sometimes I've said this before. You just feel like you're crashing into the wall because you're stuck and you can't figure out, instead of just turning around. But as humans, we're so stubborn that we think if we just keep banging away, that we're going to make it work the way we want it to work. Once we get over that, we find out, that there was actually something beautiful on the other side of that wall. We just had to figure out how to get there. And God's going to help you get there if you just let Him. And it may not be a snap of the finger, but it's not magic. And I think sometimes people kind of, miracles and magic are two different things.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
so
that's kind of hard to explain sometimes, but because a lot of times people read the Bible, like to see the miracles of Jesus, and they'll maybe just inadvertently refer to those miracles as magic, because and of course there's that's just not true.
yeah.
They're based on two different premises.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to really think of the miracles of God, and what He does if He stretches the bounds of laws, or whatever He does, if He heals, if He takes care of anything that's there. That's part of what God's will is, to for us to be able to enjoy this experience that we have. I find it interesting that you have shared a couple of things that I think is important to repeat. Number one, that many people feel like they are in control. And I believe that idea that you're in control, or that part of you that makes you believe that you're in control, actually has you blinded to the fact of what is truly the purpose of what you're here to do, how you're supposed to move, your connection that you're supposed to have with Source, with God, and what He's supposed to be doing in your life, how you are supposed to impact society, who you are supposed to impact. And then you mentioned surrender as being kind of a key, and you talked about the idea that you say, Jesus, you surrender yourself to Him on a daily basis. I believe surrender allows for us to get into a space that is actually a place where God wants us to be, where we are surrendering who we are, that means that control piece that wants to control everything, that makes you believe that you are in a place that's in control, but that you are going to actually trust God and you're going to obey God. There's a song, a hymn that I love. It says, "Trust and obey, because there is no other way to be happy in Jesus but to what? Trust and obey." And I believe that when we do that consistently, that we find a way in our lives that cause us to be in an alignment. So you surrender that control, and then it becomes a better footing for you and who you are. So share a little bit now that you've been on this journey for a while, and you are here. Can you tell us a little bit about healing, your spirituality, and in the physical pieces? And I know even recently you've gone through some different things in the physical body. What are your thoughts now that God and what God has been doing in your life when it comes to healing physical and your spirituality?
Well, again, it gets back to the surrender. The healing is in God's hand. It's not in our hands. It's in the hands of the doctors. That God's in their hands too. I think working with the young people, they've got to have something to believe in. I mean, we would like to think that we all come from a nice family where everybody loves everybody and everybody's happy and everything. But the truth of the matter is that's so not true for most people. For most people, that's not to say that they come from hell, but it's just saying that it seems like each year there's another layer of stuff that they've got to get through to get to the truth. And so my number one, the first thing that comes into mind when I think about healing is belief. You've got to believe, you got to have faith. And unfortunately, some people don't get there until that's the only thing they have left. So you for the rest of the world, the people that haven't found themselves in that horrible situation, you want to try to keep people out of that. You want to recognize problems early. Just like anything else, if you have a disease, if you're contracting a disease, excuse me, it's easier to heal it if you get to it. And you talk about healing, and I don't have an opportunity to share Native American and religious beliefs too often, but I know that a real famous faith healer in the Native American world there were two terms. There was curing and there was healing. And you can cure a disease, you can cure a situation, but healing refers to being ready for the Great Spirit, being ready for God, being, it's that purity that comes with the spiritual healing. Curing is what doctors do. Healing is what spiritual people do. And I always thought that was kind of interesting because a lot of times, a lot of times you get to the healing part through the curing part. But, I guess this faith healer said sometimes that people can, we can bring them back to life, but we can't make them, sometimes we can't get them any farther than that. And I think that's true too. We like to think that everybody's going to heaven. It scares me now because I think I'm through using the word children. Most people believe that's where they're going to go. I mean, they really do. They talk, they just talk, and you look at the way they're living and you're thinking, we need to smooth the edges out here a little because, God's a forgiving God. But sometimes when you do things that are just completely, the only way that you won't go to heaven is to just completely disavow yourself, separate yourself from God completely. And sometimes I think there's you got to say, I'm praying for everybody's soul, but my prayer is not going to get you there. It's
we
your
we
prayers
all
that's going to get you there.
we all have to make that choice ourselves, and
Right. Get you
I
back to
believe.
that surrender word.
Yeah, if we surrender and we really remove all of a lot of the patterns, a lot of the traumas, a lot of the issues that we have picked up over the time that have kind of been running on in our lives, then when we begin to remove those items, then we come back to who we were born to be, what our purpose is, and what God manufactured you to be. Because I truly believe that, we have everyone that is built. There's a reason we were put here. There's a reason you get to come here, and sometimes there are particular things that we deal with, that we are running on those programs over and over again. But the idea is that we actually get closer to the source, get closer to God, get closer to the spirituality. And as you were sharing a little bit about the healing portion versus curing, I kind of thought of, there are also two different approaches, because when we talk about spiritual healing, we're going to God, we're going inside, we're going into who we are for healing. And then when you talk about curing, it's the observable pieces of who we are. So if someone's going to cure you, they're going to figure out what it is, and then they're going to use external things. Maybe it's medicine, maybe it is surgery. There are external things that have been observed that they can help fix problems and issues from the external. One's going from the outside in, and the other's coming from the inside out. And I believe that when we understand that and we follow that and we walk in that, then what's produced is going to be a healing that is eternal, not just something that's
Mhm.
maybe
Absolutely.
temporary. Yeah. So as you've gone through, I know that you have seen quite a bit, and you've incorporated storytelling into what you do. How has that been, an incorporation of that in what you do, been helpful sharing your message?
Well, you know, as Jesus told stories, sometimes that's the way you get your message across. You reduce it to a language that people understand. It's interesting. It's believable, uh, and it's real. Um, Sometimes we can talk about stuff, we can think about stuff, uh, but if you've got a story that's that can bring your point across so much quicker, so much easier. Um, just lately, I start working with kids in Sunday school again, and of course, uh, the stories are there. So I mean, they're there for I've got a whole brain full of stories. Um, uh, but I think that helps us get where we're going, and we're comfortable. We're comfortable telling those stories. Um, uh, and I think that's another thing too. I think a lot of times people think being a Christian means that you're just always, you know, always on edge, always out searching, always preaching, always. And, the huge part of Christianity is to being able to enjoy the peace when there's peace, and work in, in the world towards a peaceful place to live. But, you know, a lot of times, people, especially children, but grown-ups too, think, I can't live that rigid Christian life. It's just too much for me. Well, most of those people have pushed that button that says, I know what's best for me. And, and when's the last time they took a breath? When's the last time they enjoyed their kids, enjoyed their wife, uh, you know, went on vacation, did stuff to allow God some time to enter into their space. There's some people today, space is so full, that, you wonder where is God going to find a space in your life? I mean, really and truly, that's really, that there's a lot of truth in that statement, because you just look at so many people and you just listen to them talk, and you think, well, you're so busy, but what are you going to have when it's over? I mean, how much of this busy is going to be something that's going to stick with you. Um, so, um, yes, I'm talking all the time, but and I'm
It's
busy, but I'm trying to direct that business in a direction that's productive, and that
yeah.
gets us back to the purpose. Uh, and I really enjoy your title, because I think that's something that makes that makes living life meaningful, to have a purpose. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes we forget that, because we got our foot on the
Yeah.
gas pedal and we're moving forward as fast as we can, and we're leaving stuff behind that we shouldn't be leaving behind, that we should be taking it in. Um, so um, I've
Yeah.
enjoyed being able to visit with you, especially because I think you're on the right track.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I believe that what you brought up about sometimes we just have so much stuff going on, a lot of things in the way that may cause us to not really walk in the purpose of who we are, be able to produce that love, that joy that we all should have, and most of all, to get to that peace. A lot of times our peace is disturbed because we have so many things that are around us. And when we learn to surrender, let go, forgive, then we are able to remove some of those things in our lives that have caused us to be blocked from that peace, that joy, and that love,
Mm,
and to be in that moment. Because what we really all need to do is to be in the moment. I need to be in the moment with everybody that I'm with. And whatever you're leaving, the best thing is to be able to leave the relationships, because we know that it's always about when you meet that person that you've seen before, but you don't quite remember what they did to you, but you remember how they made you feel. It's the
mhm.
relationships. It's the relationships that we continue to have. So I really appreciate you coming on, Calvin. And so I'm going to ask you this one question I always ask everyone on the show is for our audience, can you give 3 areas that they should start today to implement in their lives to allow them to produce on purpose based on your experience and your journey?
Well, the three words that stick out in my mind, and the ones that I live by, is belief. You got to have something to believe strongly, and belief and faith. You've got to love is the holds it's what holds us together, and we've got to strive for peace. Peace has got to be our purpose. Um, so our belief, our faith, and love, and to glorify God has to be our purpose. And if we keep that in mind, we'll always be, even if we get lost, and I get lost, we all get lost. But that word purpose and surrender, that joins my surrender term there. Purpose and surrender that'll be another word that I'll use a lot now from now on, because it brings it all back to what's real. And so that would be what I would summarize.
Well, Calvin, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your wisdom, sharing that near death experience, and also sharing about your book, of Bridging the Gap. Where can my audience find out more about you and connect with you?
Okay, the best way to find out the most about me is to go to my website. It's simply calvincassady.com. And it's Cassidy with an A and not an I, Cassady, .com. And there's a lot of background information, a lot of podcasts, a lot of interviews I've had with folks. And the book is called Bridging the Gap, A Spiritual Journey to Heaven and Back. You can get it at most online distributors. But to me, it's a quick read, because once you start, it's hard to put it down. And I think, there's something in it for everybody. I'm getting ready to do a library, literary fair at our local library here. And I'm just trying to think of questions that I could put on a poster or on the computer screen or something that will stimulate discussion. And then the key is, if you want the answers to these questions, just buy this book. And I'm not that's not how I make a living. I mean, it's not going to be something that's overpriced and they can't afford it. I've given a lot of books away just because you can see in people's eyes that maybe they don't have the money to buy a book, but they need to believe. They need the message. And to me, it's worth it to just give them the message. But that's kind of where I'm at now. How do you get people to stop for just a minute and say, what's this about? Because, I've got all these choices here. What makes you different than all the rest of them? And why should I spend my dollars here and instead of somewhere else? But over the years, questions and answers, that's the educator in me. That's how you teach. You teach by questions and answers. And that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm getting ready for that event and just trying to think of some things that will challenge people to start a conversation. And heck, even if you don't sell the book, you're still out there. You're still making contact. You're still spreading the word, just like we're doing here today. And I don't know, I think I told you before, excitement when you're 73 years old, exciting is doing a podcast at 6 o'clock at night. I mean, you look forward to it all day long, and you have a chance to tell people the good news. And I don't know. I was just thinking this afternoon how many of these I've done. I hosted my own during the pandemic called Intermission. I probably did 100 episodes of that at least. And on this podcast tour that I've been on with Atticus Publishing, I've probably done 50.
Yeah.
Met a lot of people, and you don't know who's on the other end of the, who's listening, but you know that there's somebody, and some of those people need to hear your message, and that kind of goes back to when you teach a lesson at school every day. Everybody in this room might not get the message, but somebody's going to, and if they do, then you've made a difference.
That is true. And you just keep sharing that message. I encourage everyone, reach out to Calvin at calvincassady.com. Really appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences with us. And I encourage everyone, continue to do what Calvin has talked about and he shared with us, kind of making sure we have that faith in that belief system, making sure that we are moving in a direction where, we're doing what we need to be doing, that we are surrendering. He's given us that word to make sure that we're doing that every single day. And that if we continue to move in that direction, we can continue to move in a place where we can get to that peace that is beyond all understanding, and we can then all produce on purpose.